Ever notice how history kind of gets stuck on those big dramatic moments?
Yeah, totally.
But then it's often the quieter times in between that really get us thinking.
It's true.
Like what was really going on. And we're going to dive into one of those today.
Yeah.
The 36 hours between when Jesus was crucified and then, the whole resurrection event.
Right.
As described in, this is a big one for us, the Urantia book.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we're keying in on paper 188 specifically,
Okay.
which some listeners I'm sure could recite in their sleep.
All
But
right.
for those tuning in who maybe this is their first foray into the Urantia book and its perspective,
Right.
we're going to break down some stuff that's, even for folks who know the broad strokes, is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and this text is, it refers to itself as a revealed text, right?
Yeah.
Compiled by celestial beings.
Right away. That's a whole other...
And so whether you take that literally or metaphorically, it does ask you to come at these events with a slightly different lens.
It colors how you read everything that follows, for sure.
It does, it does.
So right off the bat, this period, right after the crucifixion, the burial itself, it's described in such a, hurried, almost frantic way.
Sure.
You've got the Sabbath coming up. Can't be doing that on the Sabbath.
Right.
Roman soldiers in the mix, Jewish burial customs, this tomb that's sealed up tight. When you read that, what's the main takeaway for you about all that activity?
I think it just highlights the tension surrounding Jesus's death, right?
Yeah.
Because this wasn't just a straightforward execution.
There's layers to this.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, the text reminds us that even in that moment, people like Joseph of Arimathea believed in a resurrection.
Really believe that.
While they're preparing a body for burial.
Wild.
So imagine that hope, but also the grief of that moment, right?
Yeah, to hold both of those at the same time.
Incredibly powerful.
Which I guess tees up perfectly what happens next, because it's not like they just bury him and that's it.
Right.
You've got, and this is the part that always gets me, not one set of guards at this tomb, but two. You got the Romans and the Jewish guards. Talk about overkill. What's going on there?
It seems so comical, right? I mean,
A little bit.
it does, but I think it speaks to this deep anxiety, right? And, the text even kind of connects that to our own modern anxieties about misinformation and things like that.
Oh, interesting.
Even back then, narratives had power.
They did, yeah.
And so the power of a narrative, especially one that could challenge authority, was a serious concern.
So it wasn't even just grave robbers they were worried about.
Well, I mean, there's that, but the Sanhedrin, the Jewish council, they hadn't forgotten Jesus's claims about rising again.
Oh, right.
So the possibility that he could rise, that could validate his claims and undermine their authority, that was a risk they couldn't take.
So you've got this incredibly tense atmosphere, all this fear about what might happen if this, if the wrong people find the tomb empty.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, and this is where the Urantia book takes this turn, you've got all this other stuff going on, but it's out there in the cosmos.
Right.
Like, we're not even talking earthly drama anymore. Celestial councils are meeting. Stuff's happening on other planets. There's even this whole thing about a memorial being built.
Right.
What is going on out there while Jesus's body is just, I guess, chilling in the tomb?
Well, this is where the Urantia book's cosmology gets really fascinating, right? Because it introduces this concept of a thought adjuster.
Okay, yeah, big one.
Which is this fragment of God that resides within each of us.
We've all got a little piece of the divine.
Exactly. And upon death, the adjuster helps to transition our essence to the next stage of existence.
Okay.
But with Jesus, it's a little more complicated, right? Because he's both human and divine.
So while the human part's resting, this other part of him, this thought adjuster, is busy.
That's one way to think about it. And the text really seems to suggest that even though his human consciousness is asleep, another part of him is very much active. Wow.
Engaged in these conversations with other divine beings.
Now, that's what I call multitasking.
Right.
So, what were they even talking about during this, I guess, cosmic interlude?
Well, the Urantia book doesn't give us specifics on the conversations themselves.
Come on, man.
I know, right? But it hints at these conversations being incredibly significant.
Okay.
Potentially shaping the spiritual evolution of not just Earth, but other worlds as well.
So this isn't just like catching up over cosmic coffee.
I know, this is big picture stuff.
That's wild. Makes you wonder if a being as, frankly, divine as Jesus still has this kind of cosmic interlude going on during those 36 hours.
Yeah.
What about us? What might our own periods of just rest, reflection, what if there's more to it?
That's a question worth pondering, for sure.
Right. Maybe we're not just resting in those moments, but connecting to something much larger, just like Jesus did.
It's like we always say on here, sometimes the quietest moments,
Yeah.
they're the busiest. But behind the scenes.
It's like that saying, don't mistake silence for inaction.
Ooh, good one.
The Urantia book really, underlines that.
It does. And speaking of action, there's this whole bit about a Michael memorial being constructed, and it's on the first mansion world, which already, those two terms alone,
Sure.
got my ears perked up. Like, what is the significance of this thing, and what is a mansion world to even begin with?
Yeah, good questions. So, mansion worlds, think of those as these realms of spiritual learning that souls encounter after death.
Okay.
Not like a physical place, the way we think of it, but like spheres of progressive education and growth,
So this memorial is being built on a spiritual plane, not like we're going to go find it in the desert somewhere.
Right, exactly.
Okay, got it.
And remember, Michael is what the Urantia book uses as the divine self of Jesus.
Right, that's his whole other name.
Exactly. So this isn't just a monument in the traditional sense. It's more like this testament to the lasting impact of his teachings, even on other worlds.
So this is spreading out. It's not even just an Earth thing.
No, this is big.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And it's not even just the memorial, right? There's all this other cosmic stuff happening in these 36 hours.
Well, yeah, it really highlights how interconnected everything is. So you've got, while Jesus's body's in the tomb, you've got the Supreme Council on Salvington, which is like the headquarters of the universe. They're having a whole executive meeting about Earth.
No way, really.
The Ancients of Days, which are these incredibly wise ancient beings, they're communicating with Michael.
Oh, wow.
There's even talk of finding a replacement for Caligastia, who was that fallen planetary prince who had caused so much trouble on Earth.
Right, yeah.
So it's like this whole chain of events gets set in motion.
During this little window.
And those 36 hours become this pivotal point in cosmic history.
That's wild. It makes you think about time differently, doesn't it?
It really does.
What seems like a pause to us.
Yeah.
Could be buzzing with activity somewhere else.
Exactly.
It makes me wonder, though, because if Jesus is, human consciousness is asleep, which the book says.
Why is he having these cosmic chats? I can't even chat to someone who's actually asleep.
Well, and that's where the Urantia book, it asks us to stretch our understanding of consciousness a little bit.
Okay, sure.
Because Jesus wasn't just a human being, right?
And he was this divine being, too.
He was this Michael consciousness.
Right.
So while his human mind and body were resting, this other aspect of him, the divine aspect, could be fully active and engaged on these other levels of reality.
So it's like his team is still working even when he's, quote unquote, out of office.
It's an interesting way to picture it.
It is.
Because it reminds us that reality is way more complex and multidimensional than we often realize.
Than our little brains can handle most days, probably.
Probably. It does make you think, those times in our lives when we're in a holding pattern.
Yeah.
Waiting for something to happen.
Totally.
What if we're actually more connected then than we realize, like Jesus was?
It's a powerful image, isn't it?
It is.
It's like those periods of waiting and uncertainty aren't just empty spaces.
Right.
They're opportunities for growth and transformation on levels we can't even fathom.
I love that. Stillness isn't just our bodies resting.
Yeah.
It's our souls catching up to something bigger.
Exactly. Yeah. And that kind of leads us to another important point that the Urantia book makes, which is this idea that Jesus' death wasn't a punishment for our sins.
Right, which is something people even outside the Urantia book talk about.
Oh, absolutely.
We're so used to that idea that the crucifixion is about atonement, that he's taking on the punishment we deserve or whatever.
Yeah, and the Urantia book really pushes back on that.
It does.
It argues that God doesn't demand a blood sacrifice, like a loving father wouldn't require that kind of thing.
So if it wasn't to appease some angry God, what was the point, according to the book, of Jesus' suffering and the death?
That's the question, isn't it? And the answer, in essence, is love.
Okay.
It's the ultimate act of love.
Really?
A demonstration of God's unconditional love for humanity.
So less about the suffering itself and more about the love that shines through it.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's recognizing that even in the face of hatred, violence, death, God's love is still present, still active, still working to redeem and heal.
Man, that's kind of what we need to hear these days, isn't it?
It really is. And it reminds us that we have a choice in how we respond to suffering.
We do.
We can meet it with fear, anger, despair.
Yeah, that's easy to do these days.
It is. Or we can choose to respond with love, compassion, forgiveness, just like Jesus did.
So it's not just a 2,000-year-old story. It's about how we live now.
Exactly. The Urantia book wants us to tap into that divine spark, the thing that allowed Jesus to face the cross with courage, compassion,
Right.
and to remember that even in our own deaths, whether literal or metaphorical,
Ooh, good point.
there's potential for resurrection, for renewal, for deeper connection to the divine.
It really makes you think about the impact, right?
It does.
Like one person's life.
Yeah.
And in this case, we're not even talking just an Earth impact.
Right, exactly.
The Urantia book suggesting this is way bigger.
Oh, absolutely.
We've been in the cosmic weeds here. But for folks listening who are like, okay, but what does that mean for my Tuesday?
Right. Well,
what's the connection back to, our regular lives?
Well, I think it reminds us that even when things seem really ordinary, something extraordinary might be unfolding on a different level.
Ooh, I like that.
It's like we're all part of this grand cosmic tapestry.
Okay.
And our choices, our actions, they have these ripples that extend far beyond what we can actually see.
It's like a secret mission we're all on.
Kind of, yeah.
But it's less about being secretive, more like we just don't have the security clearance to know the whole plan yet.
Exactly. And I think that's where that Urantia book emphasis on love is so important,
Okay, yeah.
It's not just this fluffy feeling, it's an active force.
So how do we tap into that? Like, how do we take these cosmic events and bring them down to Earth, into how we live day to day?
Well, the Urantia book suggests it starts with recognizing that divine spark within ourselves and in others.
Got it.
Choosing compassion over judgment, forgiveness over resentment.
Tough ones, though.
They are. But choosing love over fear, especially when things are difficult.
Because it's easy to get caught up in, like, those little deaths.
Right.
Not even talking literally, but just the losses, the grief, the disappointments.
Absolutely.
And thinking that's the end of it. But like you were saying with the crucifixion itself, Urantia book's saying, no, that led to something way bigger.
Exactly.
So maybe our own deaths do the same, just in a different way.
And remember, we don't have to have it all figured out, right?
Oh, thank goodness.
Even the Urantia book, it leaves us with more questions than answers.
Oh, for sure.
It's not about having this rigid set of beliefs. It's more about cultivating this sense of wonder, this willingness to explore, ask those big questions, and trust the process.
Even when it's like, where's the instruction manual for this part?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So as we kind of wrap up here, this whole deep dive on the Urantia book in these 36 hours, what's the one big takeaway you hope folks are left with?
Approach life and death with curiosity, with an open heart, and a deep trust in that love that connects us all.
That's beautiful. And I think that's what I love about these deep dives,
Yeah.
It's that sense of wonder, that connection we find by really digging in.
It's always there.
It really is. And for everyone listening, don't stop digging. Keep asking those big questions. Keep seeking that connection to, something bigger than ourselves.
Absolutely.
Whether it's in you, out there in the universe, whatever speaks to you.
It's out there.
This has been The Deep Dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.